Okay, so check out your chapter, Socialism in Europe and Russian Revolution. I'm going to share my screen. Hi Jitendra, how are you?
Good evening.
Good evening, good evening. Please take out your chapters. Okay, is anybody free? Anybody wants to read? We had done the French Revolution, okay, and now we had seen the revolution started from France, okay, and they were the common man was very much harassed by the monarch, okay, and the clergy. So, like you've seen, a new society had emerged in the in Europe, and they were the liberals, the radicals, and the conservatives. Okay. Okay, now after the revolution, individuals' rights and social power began to be discussed in many parts of the world, including Europe and Asia. Colonial development reshaped ideas of societal change, but everyone was in favor of the complete transformation of the society. So socialism was becoming popular. So through the revolution in Russia, socialism became one of the most significant and powerful ideas to shape society in the 20th century. So let's talk about the liberals, radicals, and the conservatives. So the liberals wanted a nation which tolerated all religions, all religions. They opposed the uncontrolled power of the dynastic rule and argued for a representative, okay, elected parliamentary government subject to laws interpreted by a well-trained judiciary that was independent of rulers and officials. They wanted a government based on the majority of a country's population. Whereas conservatives after the 19th century accepted changes but also believed the post added. So the conservatives agreed, okay, it should change, but it should they agreed that the change should come very slowly. It is not should not come sudden. So what was the difference between the liberals and the radicals? So liberals they wanted uncontrolled power. They opposed the uncontrolled power of the dynasty, but and that everybody should have a right to vote. But they were not in favor of the right to vote for women and for the landless people. Okay, so those who did not have any land, they should not vote, and the women should not vote. Okay, but the radicals were in favor that all should be included into the government. Okay, so now as the time progressed, okay, we got industrial changes in Europe, and till now everybody was dependent on agriculture. But as the society progressed, as the time progressed, industrial society also came. Okay, so now the industrial revolution led to changes in social and economic life. Okay, new cities came up and new industrialized regions developed. Men, women, and children came to factories in search of work, but unfortunately, working hours were long and wages were poor. Okay, so they were very much, the workers were now being harassed by the mill owners. But unfortunately, there was unemployment during the time of low demand for industrial goods. Liberals and radicals made wealth through trade and industrial ventures. According to them, society can be developed if the freedom of individuals is ensured, if the poor can labor, and if those with capital can operate without restraint. So, in France, Italy, Germany, and Russia, revolutionaries overthrew existing monarchs, and nationalists talked of revolutions to create nations with equal rights. So it was the businessman, or you can say the educated, who grew up as a middle class. Okay, we'll do a little bit of reading so that we will understand better. Somebody read for me. Read from here one of the groups which looked to change. Read from here. Sampath, you want to read? Shravan, okay, Sampath, you read.
Ma'am, yes, ma'am. One of one of the groups which looked to one of the groups which looked to change society were the liberals. Liberals wanted a nation which tolerated all religions. We should remember that at this time, European states usually discriminated in favor of one religion or another. Britain favored the Church of England, Austria, and Spain favored the Catholic Church. Liberals also opposed the uncontrolled power of the dynastic rulers. They wanted to safeguard the rights of individuals against governments. They argued for a representative elected parliamentary government subject to laws interpreted by a well-trained judiciary that was independent of rulers and officials. However, they were not Democrats. They did not believe in universal adult franchise, that is, the right of every citizen to vote. They felt men of property mainly should have the votes. They also did not want the vote for men.
And they also did not want to vote for women. Continue reading.
In contra- In contrast, radicals wanted a nation in which government was based on the majority of a country's population. Many supported women's suffrage movement. Unlike liberals, they opposed the privileges of great landowners and wealthy factory owners. They were not against the existence of private property but disliked concentration of property in the hands of few.
So what was their difference? They wanted that they were against private property, like a person will acre all kind of all of the land. So they were against that. That there should be one person should not hold all the property. Okay, so they were not against the existence of private property, but disliked concentration of property in the hands of a few. Okay, so what happened? If a person owned all the land, so he would start doing whatever he wishes. Okay, so that is how the harassment had started. Okay, now let's talk about the conservatives. Read further.
Yes, ma'am. Uh, yes, conservatives were opposed to radicals and liberals. After the French Revolution, however, even conservatives had opened their minds to the need for change. Earlier, the 18th century, many conservatives had been generally opposed to the idea of change. By the 19th century, they accepted that some change was inevitable, but believed that the past had to be respected and the change had to be brought about through a slow process. Such differing ideas about societal change clashed during the social and political turmoil that followed the French Revolution. The various attempts at revolution and the national transformation in the 19th century helped define both the limits and potential of the political tendencies.
Okay, so we have studied the difference between the liberals, radicals, and conservatives. Okay. Okay, now comes the industrial society and the social change. So I told you how industry became to develop, and now the persons who they began to develop industries. Okay, and because of the growth of population, people began to migrate from the rural areas to the urban side in search of jobs. Okay, now when they were abandoned labor, they began to be exploited. Okay, they were made to work for long hours and they were paid less. Okay, and also there was a problem of unemployment that led to slums. Okay, Jitendra, you want to read?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
The political trends were signs of a new time. It was a time of profound social and economic changes. It was a time when new cities came up and new industrialized regions developed. Railways expanded and the industrial revolution occurred. Industrialization brought men, women and children to factories. Work hours were often long and the wages were poor. Unemployment was common, particularly during the times of low demand for industrial goods. Housing and sanitation were problems since towns were growing rapidly. Liberals and radicals searched for solutions to these issues. Almost all industries were the property of individuals. Liberals and radicals themselves were often property owners and employees. Having made their wealth through the political trade or industrial ventures, they felt that such effort should be encouraged. But its benefits would be achieved if the workforce in the economy was healthy and citizens were educated. Opposed to the privileges the old aristocracy had by birth, they firmly believed in the value of industrial effort, labor, and enterprise. If freedom of individuals was ensured, if the poor could labor, and those with capital could operate without restraint, they believed the societies would develop. Many working men and women who wanted changes in the world rallied around liberal and radical groups and parties in the early 19th century. Some nationalist liberals and radicals wanted revolutions to put an end to the kind of government established in Europe in 1815. In France, Italy, Germany, and Russia, they became revolutionaries and worked to overthrow existing monarchs. Nationalists talked of revolutions that would create nations where all citizens would have equal rights. After 1815, Giuseppe
Giuseppe Mazzini.
Giuseppe Mazzini, an Italian nationalist, cons- conspired conspired with others to achieve this in Italy. Nationalists elsewhere, including India, read his writings.
Okay, so the radicals and the liberals, they wanted the employees to be healthy and they wanted them to be fit, right? But what happened? They were the ones who were also making money out of it. Okay, so they wanted freedom to be ensured. Okay, and but there was this plight was there on the industrial movement. Okay, and they wanted a change but they had no idea how to make this change. Okay, so who came up? Italian nationalist, Goscinny Mazzini, he came up with this idea of socialism. Okay, so this is the now with the Giuseppe Mazzini came up, and there were many others who came up with this idea of socialism in Europe. So it became to become popular. It began to become popular, but nobody and but Italy, France, and all that, they were nobody were able to make a government that was social. Only the Russian were able to make a socialist government. Okay, so we are going to talk about the coming of socialism in Europe. So socialism was a well-known body of ideas by the mid-19th century in Europe. Socialists were against private property and saw it as a root of all social ills of the time. They wanted to change it and campaigned for it. Robert Owen, okay, he was a philosopher, okay, so to build a cooperative community called New Harmony in Indiana. Indiana, USA. Now, this is another person, Louis Blanc. Okay, he wanted the government to encourage cooperatives and replace capitalist enterprises. Karl Marx, okay, and Friedrich Engels, okay, added their ideas to this body of arguments. So, these these activists, they brought up the idea of socialism. Okay, according to Marx, industrial society was capitalist who owned the capital invested in factories, and the profit of capitalist was produced by workers. Capitalism and the rule of private property were overthrown. Marx believed that a communist society was the natural society of the future. Okay, now the people begin to give their support to socialism. How was that? By the 1870s, socialist ideas spread through Europe, and they formed an international body, namely the second international associations were formed by workers in Germany and England to fight for better living and working conditions. The Labour Party and the Socialist Party were formed by socialists and trade unions by 1905. Okay, you'll understand better when we read it. Okay, who wants to read? Shravan, you want to read?
Yeah, perhaps one of the most far-reaching visions of how society should be structured is socialism. By the mid-19th century in Europe, socialism and was a well-known body of ideas that attracted widespread attention. Socialists were against private property and saw it as a root of all social ills of the time. Why? Individuals owned the property that gave employment, but the property were concerned only with personal gain and not with welfare of those who made the property productive. So if society as a whole rather than single individual controlled property, more attention would be paid to collective social interests. Socialists wanted this change and campaigned for it. How could a society without property operate? What would be the basis of socialist society? Socialists had different visions of the future. Some believed in the ideas of cooperatives. Robert Owen, a leading English manufacturer, sought to build a cooperative community called the New Harmony in Indiana, USA. Other socialists felt that cooperatives could not be built on a wide scale only through individual initiative. They demanded that governments encourage cooperatives. In France, for instance, Louis Blanc wanted the government to encourage cooperatives and replace capitalist and enterprises. These cooperatives were to be an association of people who produce goods together and divided the profits according to the work done by members, called mm,
Marx.
Marx and Friedrich
Frederick.
Eng- Friedrich Engels added other ideas to this body of arguments. Marx argued that industrial society was capitalist. Capitalists owned the capital, invested in factories, and the profit of capitalists was produced by workers. The condition of workers could not improve as long as the profit was accumulated by private capitalists. Workers had to overthrow the capitalism and the rule of private property. Marx believed that to free themselves from capitalist exploitation, workers had to construct a radically society where all property was socially controlled. This would be communist society. He was convinced that workers would triumph in their conflict with capitalists. The communist society was a natural society of the future.
Okay, so you there in this part of the chapter we are talking about the ideas of socialism. Okay, So, so they were the first of all they were against the private property. They said that they should be they were against private property, and there should be they had an idea of cooperatives. Cooperatives means people should work together in a property, and the profit should be shared equally among everyone. Okay, so but this was so they wanted the government, they demanded that the government should encourage cooperatives. So means every land and every agriculture and every industry should be government controlled. Okay, and so what was his idea? That he believed that the industrial society, those industry owners, they were capitalists. Okay, they accumulated private capitals, and because of this, the plight of the workers were poor. Okay, so if if this was controlled, and if this was made a communist society, the workers the condition of the workers would also improve. Okay, so now began the support of socialism. Who wants to read? Jitendra, you want to read?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
By the 1870s, the socialist ideas spread through Europe. To coordinate their efforts, socialists formed an international body, namely the Second International. Workers in England and Germany began forming associations to fight for better living and working conditions. They set up funds to help members in times of distress and demanded a reduction of working hours and the right to vote. In Germany, these associations worked closely with the Social Democratic Party and helped it win parliamentary seats. By 1905, socialists and trade unionists formed a Labour Party in Britain and Socialist Party in France. However, in 1940s, socialists never succeeded in forming a government in Europe. Represented by strong figures in parliamentary politics, their ideas did shape legislation, but the government continued to run by conservatives, liberals, and radicals.
Okay, so by the support of socialism in Germany, yeah, so in Germany we had, there was a party that is the Socialist Democratic Party, SPD, Party, and then in Britain there was the Labour Party. Okay, and in France there was the Socialist Party. So the popularity had begun and parties were formed. Okay, however, in socialists they never succeeded in forming a government. None of these countries they were succeeded in forming a government. Okay, so what happens next? Let's see. Okay, it was only in Russia that the government was formed. Okay, now this man you see here, this Tsar Nicholas II. Okay, he was the monarch of Russia. Okay, and he went to war with so he went to war with Japan. Okay, now in October Revolution in 1917, socialists took over the government in Russia. Okay, now the fall of monarchs in February 1917 and the events of October were termed as a Russian Revolution. So there was a revolution in. So we'll talk about the Russian Revolution in detail. In 1914, Russia was ruled by this Tsar Nicholas II and his empire. The Russian Empire included current-day Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, parts of Poland, Ukraine, and Belarus, stretching to the Pacific and comprised today's Central Asian states, and as well as Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. The majority of the population was Russian Orthodox Christianity. Okay, so you see that Russia was very different from what it is today, and it was a very wide, very big country. Now let's talk about the economy. At the beginning of the 20th century, the Russian population was dominated by agriculturists. Okay, they were based about on agriculture, who used to cultivate for the market as well as for their own needs. So they even exported their agricultural produce. St. Petersburg and Moscow were prominent industrial areas. Okay, so these had industries. Craftsmen undertook much of the production, but large factories existed alongside craft workshops. In the 1890s, more factories were set up, and foreign investment in industry increased. Large factories were supervised by the government to ensure minimum wages and limited hours of work. Workers were a divided social group. They were also divided by their skill. Despite division, workers united to stop work. This is important. So they were divided according to social groups, and they were also divided by their skills. But what happened? There was unity among the workers. If any of the worker faced a problem, they stopped working. They protested together. Okay, workers united to stop work when they disagreed with employers about dismissal of or work conditions. Peasants cultivated most of the land, but the nobility, the crown, and the Orthodox Church owned large properties. Nobles got power and position through their services to the Tsar. In Russia, peasants wanted the land of the nobles. So now there is we are going to talk about the urban area and the rural areas. So the workers were having a tough time in the urban areas, and the peasants were having a tough time in the rural areas. So there, the industrial owners were pressuring the workers, and here the nobles were pressuring the peasants. So next comes the socialism in Russia. Political parties in Russia were legal before 1914. So afterwards, Tsar he made all political parties as illegal. Nobody can form a political party. In 1898, socialists founded the Russian Social Democratic Workers' Party, which represented Marx's idea. Some Russian socialists felt that the Russian peasants' custom of dividing and periodically made them natural socialists. Throughout the 19th century, socialists were active in the countryside and formed the Socialist Revolutionary Party in 1990. The party struggled for peasants' rights. So there were two parties. Okay, this one was in the urban area. Okay, and the Socialist Revolutionary Party, this was in the rural area. Okay, this was by the workers, and this was by the peasants. Okay, the party struggled for peasants' rights and demanded land belonging to nobles be transferred to peasants. Okay, this what happened. They struggled for peasants' rights and demanded land belonging to the nobles be transferred to peasants. Okay, now this what happened. Some Russian socialists felt the Russian peasant customs of dividing land periodically made them unnecessary. Throughout the 19th century, socialists were active in the countryside and formed. Okay, so no, the party was divided over this tragedy of the organization. According to Vladimir Lenin, in a repressive society like Tsarist, the party should be disciplined and should control the number and quality of its members. Mensheviks thought that the party should be open to all. So the what happened? These thought that this party, the Russian Socialist Democratic Party, they thought that only good quality men should join the party. Okay, whereas Mensheviks, okay, they thought that it should be open for all, no matter he is poor without land or he is uneducated, he should be allowed to join the membership. Somebody read the Russian Empire. Uh, who wants to read? Sampath, you want to read? Are you there, Sampath?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, start.
Now I got my question. In 1914, Tsar Nicholas II ruled Russia and its empire. Besides the territory around Moscow, the Russian Empire included current-day Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, parts of Poland, Ukraine, and Belarus. It stretched through Pacific and comprise today's Central Asian states, as well as Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Baijan. The majority religion was Russian Orthodox Christianity, which had grown out of the Greek Orthodox Church, but the empire was also included Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, and Buddhists.
Okay, so although there were other religions, but the main majority was Russian Orthodox Christianity. Okay, go ahead. Economy and society.
Economy and society. At the beginning of the 20th century, the vast majority of Russia's people were agriculturalists. About 85% of Russian Empire's population earned their living from agriculture. This proportion was higher than in most European countries. For instance, in France and Germany, the proportion was between 40% and 50%. In the empire, cultivators produced for the market as well as for their own needs, and Russia was a major exporter of grain. Industry was found in pockets. Prominent industrial areas were St. Petersburg and Moscow. Craftsmen undertook much of the production, but large factories existed alongside craft workshops. Many factories were set up in the 1890s when the Russian railway network was extended and the foreign investment in industry increased. Coal production doubled and iron and steel output quadrupled. By the 1900s, in some areas, factory workers and craftsmen were almost equal in number. Most industries was the private property of industrialists. Government supervised large factories to ensure minimum wages and limited hours of work. But the factory inspectors could not prevent rules being broken. In craft units and small workshops, the working day was sometimes 15 hours compared to 10 or 12 hours in factories. Accommodation varied from rooms to dormitories. Workers were a divided social group. Some had strong links with the villages from which they came, others had settled in cities permanently. Workers were divided by skill. A metal worker of St. Petersburg recalled metal workers considered themselves aristocrats among other workers. Their occupation demanded more training and skill. Women made up to 30%, 31% of the factory labor forced by 1914, but they were paid less than men, between half and three quarters of a man's wage. Division among strong workers showed themselves in dress and manners too. Some workers formed associations to help members in times of unemployment or financial hardship, but such associations were very few. Despite divisions, workers did unite to strike work stop work when they disagreed with the employees about dismissals of or work conditions. These strikes took place frequently in the textile industry during 1896 to 1897 and in metal industry during 1902. In the countryside, peasants cultivated most of the land, but the nobility, the crown, and the Orthodox Church owned large properties like workers' peasants too were divided. They were also
Okay, we can stop now. We'll continue this next class. We are out of time. Okay, so you understand the society of the Europe and how it was. They were all favoring socialism, but they were not able to form a government there. But things were different in Russia. Okay, the workers were although the workers were divided, yet they were united and they protested together whenever any one of them each had a problem. So I will request you all to please read the chapter. Okay. Anybody has any question? I'll take up any question. Yeah, Sampath, any question?
no, ma'am.
Okay then. Okay, now I will end the class now. Bye. Good night.